The war room of the Concorde flagship Pale Doctrine smelled like ozone and old decisions. 17 holographic worlds floated above the central table, each one dimmed to red. Dead colonies. Burned atmospheres. 2 billion civilians turned to carbon statistics in the span of a single galactic rotation. Admiral Voshan of the Veshan Diplomatic Corps stood at the head of the table, his mantis-like arms folded behind his back, and delivered the same sentence he had delivered in 6 previous sessions. We require external military assistance. No one argued anymore. The Davari Dominion had broken every formation the Concorde had thrown at them. Not because the Davari were smarter. Not because their ships were better. They were just willing to do things the Concorde had written rules against centuries ago. They rammed. They boarded. They fought in hallways and cafeterias and nurseries. They turned civilization into a disadvantage. So the Concorde sent a formal request to Earth. They asked for a fleet. Battleships. Carriers. A proper armada led by a proper admiral with proper stars on proper shoulders. Earth's United Military Command received the request on a Wednesday. They responded on a Thursday. They sent a shuttle. One shuttle.
No escort.
It docked at Bay 11 of the Pale Doctrine without ceremony, without announcement, without even requesting priority clearance. It just arrived. Like a delivery no one had ordered. Emissary Pollack was assigned to greet them. He was young for a Veshan diplomat, which meant he was only 400 years old, and he stood at the docking bay doors with a formal welcome prepared on a glass tablet. He had rehearsed the pronunciation of human military ranks. He had studied their salute customs. He was ready. The bay doors opened. 12 humans walked out. Pollack's prepared speech died somewhere between his brain and his mouth. He had expected uniforms with color. Medals. Ribbons. The shiny confidence of command officers. What he got was matte black tactical gear with no insignia, no rank markers, no unit patches. 12 people dressed like they had come to fix a plumbing problem in a dangerous neighborhood. The one in front was a woman. Compact. Not tall. Not physically remarkable by any galactic standard. She carried a duffel bag over one shoulder and she was chewing something. Her eyes moved across the docking bay the way a camera moves across a room, mechanical and total, missing nothing, caring about none of it. Captain Kang Jury, she said. Not a greeting. An identification. Like reading a serial number off a piece of equipment. Pollack fumbled his tablet. Emissary Pollack, Veshan Diplomatic Corps, on behalf of the Galactic Concorde, I welcome. Where's the war room? There is a formal reception prepared. The Council wishes to. War room first. Reception never. Behind her, a broad-shouldered man with a shaved head was already scanning the corridor walls. Not admiring them. Measuring them. Pollack would later learn his name was Yoon Taiho, and that he had once collapsed a 6-story building using 4 charges and a kitchen timer. The man next to him, lean and calm with eyes that didn't seem to blink at a normal rate, was Ha Dogun. He carried a long case on his back that Pollack assumed was some kind of instrument. It was not an instrument. Pollack led them to the war room. The walk took 4 minutes. In those 4 minutes, the shortest human, a woman named Shin Nari, memorized the location of every ventilation access panel, maintenance hatch, and emergency bulkhead on the route. She did this the way most people breathe. Without thinking about it. Without stopping. The War Council was waiting. 12 Concorde generals in crystal weave armor that caught the light like frozen rivers. They had commanded fleets. Won campaigns. Liberated star systems. They looked at the 12 humans the way a banquet table looks at a bag of street food. This is the Earth contingent. General Murith, a broad Tauranee with 4 arms and a reputation for bluntness, leaned forward. Where is your fleet? Jury dropped her duffel bag on the floor. The thud echoed. You don't have a fleet problem, she said. You have a killing problem. Fleets don't fix that. Muritha's secondary arms twitched. War is fought between fleets. Between civilizations. Between doctrines. How many worlds have your doctrines saved this year? Silence. The holographic dead worlds pulsed red behind her. Jury didn't wait for the silence to become uncomfortable. She was already past it. We need intel. Not fleet positions. Not battle formations. I need guard rotation patterns for every Davari installation you have data on. Ventilation schematics. mess hall schedules, what they eat, when they sleep, how their officers get promoted, and what happens to the ones who don't. These are logistical minutiae, Pollock said carefully. These are the locks, Jury said. We are the keys. The briefing lasted an hour. The humans asked questions the Concorde had never considered relevant to warfare. Sewage systems, lighting cycles, religious observance schedules. Park Juno, a man with a forgettable face and an unforgettable voice, requested access to captured Davari communication equipment, not to decode it, to learn how their officers sounded when they were bored, when they were scared, when they were lying. The generals provided everything, not because they understood, because they had nothing left to lose. Afterward, the team was offered officer quarters on the command deck. Jury chose a cargo bay on the lower levels instead. More exits. Pollock stood in the corridor outside the cargo bay at 0200 hours. Through the half-open door, he could see Taiho drawing diagrams on the wall with a black marker, sketching breach patterns with the relaxed focus of someone doodling in a boring class. Nari sat in the corner reading Davari autopsy reports on a tablet, her face lit blue. Juno had 3 communication devices spread across the floor, tuning into Davari frequencies, his head tilted like a dog hearing a sound no one else could hear. No one was sleeping. No one seemed to think that was unusual. Pollock went back to his quarters and filed his 9th report to the Concorde Council in 3 hours. He stared at the subject line for a long time before he typed it. Asterisk re-evaluation of threat classification regarding our allies. Asterisk. He almost deleted it. He sent it instead. And then he sat in the dark for a while, listening to the hum of the ship around him, thinking about the woman who chewed gum and asked about ventilation shafts, and the way she had looked at 12 crystal-armored generals like they were furniture she might need to move later. The moon was called Vethos 4, a communications relay station bolted to a rock with no atmosphere and no strategic value except that every Davari fleet command in the sector routed through its signal arrays. Take the relay, and the Dominion's left flank went deaf. The Concorde wanted to retake it with a fleet. 42 warships. A standard envelopment formation. Orbital bombardment followed by marine landing. Estimated casualties, 6,000 to 8,000 Concorde soldiers. Estimated time, 3 days. Kang Jury sat in the briefing and listened to the whole plan without expression. When the Concorde general finished, she said, No. 6 operators. 12 hours. 0 bombardment. We take the relay intact. General Murith made a sound that, on a Torah knee, passed for laughter. The station holds 300 Davari soldiers, Captain. I know. We counted. Murith looked around the table for someone who shared his disbelief. No one met his eyes. The other generals had seen the cargo bay, the wall diagrams, the woman reading autopsy reports at 2 in the morning. The fleet will provide a distraction pass, Murith said, and it came out less like permission and more like a prayer. The shuttle dropped 6 of them on the dark side of Vethos, for at 0300 station time. Jury, Nari, Taiho,
Dogun,
Ja Iana, and a quiet operator named B.A. Sohan who carried nothing but a short rifle and a roll of wire and who had not spoken a full sentence since boarding the Asterisk Pale Doctrine Star. Nari and Dogun went first. The Davari had posted sentries at all external access points. Standard positions. Predictable rotations. The kind of security that works against enemies who announce themselves. Nari moved across the lunar surface in short bursts between shadow and rock, her suit's thermal signature suppressed to background noise. She reached the first sentry from behind. There was no sound. In vacuum, there never is. The sentry was there. Then the sentry was not there. Dogun handled the second and third from distance. His rifle was modified. Human optics bolted onto a Concorde frame. Each shot was a brief flash of light that could have been a micrometeorite impact. The external camera feeds died one by one. 6-second intervals. Timed exactly to the gap between guard reports so the monitoring station inside would see each camera go dark just after a routine check confirmed it was fine. By the time the Davari noticed, the humans were already inside the walls. Taiho planted 3 breaching charges, 2 on opposite ends of the main corridor, 1 at the base of the barracks level. He set them on the same timer. 3 simultaneous explosions, and the entire station shook like a dog hit with cold water. The Davari responded exactly as their doctrine demanded. Reinforcement teams rushed to the blast sites. Officers barked orders into comms. Soldiers poured through corridors toward the explosions. The actual entry point was a ventilation shaft on the maintenance level. Nari had found it 3 days earlier in stolen service logs. 30-centimeter clearance. No Davari could fit. The humans fit. Barely. Jury went first because she always went first, and she came out of the shaft sealing into a storage room with her rifle already up before her boots touched the floor. What followed was not a battle. Pollack, watching from the flagship through helmet-mounted feeds, would struggle for months to find the right word. The closest he ever came was processing. The humans moved through the station the way water moves through a cracked dam, finding every gap, filling every space, applying pressure exactly where the structure was weakest. They didn't charge. They didn't shout. They used doorways like frames, appearing in them just long enough to fire and disappearing before return shots arrived. They let the Davari's own panic drive soldiers into corridors that had already been cleared and sealed behind them. Room by room. Hallway by hallway. Each space entered, cleared, and left behind like a closed chapter. The Davari were bigger. Faster. Their bone-plated skin could absorb small arms fire. It didn't matter. The humans didn't shoot where the armor was. They shot where it wasn't. Joints. Throat membranes. The soft gap beneath the lower mandible that the Davari themselves considered too small to protect. Cho Yena was the medic. She carried a sidearm and a trauma kit. In Corridor 7, she put 2 rounds through a Davari officer's throat gap, stepped over his body, and crouched beside a wounded alien civilian who had been caught in the crossfire. She sealed the wound with adhesive gel, injected a broad-spectrum stabilizer, and murmured something in a language the civilian didn't understand but in a tone that needed no translation. Then she stood up and followed Jury into the next room. On the flagship, the War Council watched in silence. 12 senior military commanders from 8 species, and none of them spoke. The helmet feeds showed a vocabulary of violence they had no framework for. The Concord fought wars the way orchestras play music, coordinated, structured, beautiful in a terrible way. The humans fought the way a fire eats a building. No beauty. No structure. Just heat applied with terrifying knowledge of where things burn fastest. Admiral Voshan turned off his screen first. His aide, a young Veshan with silver-tipped antennae, asked if he was all right. Voshan looked at the darkened screen for a long time. He didn't answer the question. He asked one instead. How old is their species? Approximately 300,000 years, Admiral. And how long have they been fighting each other? All of it, sir. Voshan nodded. The kind of nod that closes a door in the mind. The operation ended 4 hours after it began. 300 Davari dead. 0 human casualties. The relay station was intact. Every system functional. The Concord recovery team arrived expecting rubble and found clean corridors, powered systems, and silence. Park Juno stayed behind after the team extracted. He sat in the dead communications officer's chair, pulled up the Davari command frequency, and began transmitting. He used the dead officer's voice authentication. He used the dead officer's reporting cadence, the same rhythm and tone and board professionalism that had characterized the real officer's transmissions for 3 years. Relay secure. Operations normal. No incidents. He sent this report every 6 hours for 3 days. The Dominion Sector Command acknowledged each one with standard replies. For 72 hours, the Davari's entire left flank operated on intelligence routed through an enemy who answered their calls with a dead man's voice and a living man's patience. Pollack updated his personal log that night. He had written dozens of entries since the humans arrived. Long, detailed, analytical. This one was short. They don't fight wars. They delete the people standing in the way of peace. He read it back. It didn't feel accurate enough. Too clean. Too kind. He added a second line. And they do it so quietly that the dead don't know they're dead until the shooting stops. He closed the log. In the cargo bay below, Taiho was drawing new diagrams on the wall. Nari was reading. Juno was listening to enemy frequencies. No one was sleeping. Tessara was a garden colony. 2 million civilians. Artists and farmers and families who had chosen a quiet planet at the edge of Concord space because the light there was golden for 19 hours a day. The kind of place where children grew up believing war was something that happened to other people. The Davari war fleet arrived at dawn. 40 ships in low orbit. Troop carriers descending like black seeds falling through honey-colored sky. 10,000 ground soldiers. The Dominion didn't want Tessara for resources or strategy. They wanted it for the same reason they wanted every colony they burned. Because fear travels faster than light, and a dead garden tells every other garden what happens when you stand with the Concorde. The Concorde fleet was 3 days away. There was no way to accelerate that. Physics doesn't care about politics. Kang Jury's team was on Tessara for a resupply stop. 12 humans in a colony of 2 million civilians, refilling water tanks and recalibrating equipment in a rented warehouse near the spaceport. Accident of timing. Coincidence. Jury didn't believe in coincidence, but she also didn't waste time arguing with it. She looked at Tessera's city layout on a projection table. Wide boulevards. Open parks. Residential towers with glass walls. Beautiful architecture designed for light and air and community. Terrible architecture for defense. Every open space was a kill zone. Every glass wall was a fragmentation hazard. Every boulevard was an invitation for armored advance. Taiho, she said. How many buildings can you drop in 6 hours? Yoon Taiho looked at the map like a sculptor looks at raw stone. Which direction do you want them to fall? They didn't evacuate Tessara. There weren't enough transports and there wasn't enough time. Instead, Jury split the team. Cho Yena and Bae Sohun organized civilians into the underground transit system, packing families into tunnels with water, food, and instructions that were clear and calm and left no room for panic. Yena spoke to frightened parents the way she spoke to wounded soldiers. Direct. Warm. Absolutely certain. Above ground, Taiho went to work. He dropped 4 residential towers across the main boulevard, creating a wall of rubble that turned the widest avenue into a choke point barely 6 meters across. He collapsed a pedestrian bridge onto a secondary road. He rigged commercial buildings with charges set to blow inward, turning storefronts into shrapnel-filled dead ends that looked passable from a distance. Shin Nari mapped the colony's maintenance tunnels in 2 hours. Every access point, every junction, every place where a small person could enter and a large Davari could not. She moved through them once to memorize the routes. She would move through them 100 more times before the siege ended. Park Juno hacked the colony's public address system. He loaded it with Davara death chants, their own funeral songs, slowed to half speed, distorted, layered over each other until they became something between music and a migraine. He set them to play on a random loop across different sectors so the sound was never predictable, never locatable, never something the enemy could tune out. Ha Dogun climbed to the roof of the colony's water treatment plant, the taller structure still standing. He set up his rifle, checked his sight lines, and did not move from that position for the next 31 hours. He ate cold rations in the prone position. He relieved himself in a container without shifting his eye from the scope. The Davari landed expecting what they always found. Panic. Chaos. Running civilians and a token garrison firing symbolic shots before surrendering under doctrine. They found a ghost city that sang their funeral songs. The first column entered the main boulevard. 300 soldiers in formation, bone-plated and confident. They reached the rubble wall and stopped. While they stopped, Ha Dogun removed their column commander with a single shot from 1,100 meters. The soldiers scattered into side streets that Taiho had prepared with loving attention. The second column tried the residential district. Nari was waiting in the tunnels. She appeared behind their line, killed 2 officers, and vanished through an access hatch too small for pursuit. She did this 4 times. Each time from a different location. Each time targeting officers. By the 5th hour, Davari squad leaders were more afraid of the tunnels beneath them than the enemy ahead of them. Juno monitored their communications. He listened to their panic grow like watching water rise. Requests for reinforcement were met with confusion. Juno was feeding false reports into their network, duplicating unit designations, confirming arrivals that never happened, redirecting support to locations that didn't exist. Block by block, the Davara paid for Tessara in bodies. Every intersection was a decision between 2 bad options. Every building might be empty or might be the last room you ever entered. The golden light of Tessera's long days turned the dust from collapsed buildings into a glowing haze that cut visibility and made every shadow into a possible death. On the second day, Pollack found Jury in a destroyed cafe on the border of Sector 9. She was sitting on an overturned table. In her hands was a child's shoe. Small. Blue. Scuffed at the toe. No child attached. Jury wasn't looking at the shoe. She was looking at the wall across from her where a mural of hand-painted flowers had survived the blast that took the rest of the building. Yellow petals on white plaster. Someone had spent time on it. Pollack asked if she was all right. He asked because he was a diplomat, and diplomats ask questions they already know the answer to. Jury put the shoe down. She placed it carefully on the overturned table, toe facing the mural, as if the invisible child might want to see the flowers. "I need you to move the civilians from Sector 9, she said. "We are going to collapse it." That was all. She stood and walked out. Pollack looked at the shoe on the table. He looked at the flowers on the wall. He understood something then, not about Jury, but about the distance between what she carried and what she showed. The gap was the size of a war. The Concorde fleet arrived on the third day. They found the Davari ground force broken. 10,000 had landed. 783 made it back to their ships. The rest were scattered across Tessara in pieces, in rubble, in collapsed buildings that Taiho had dropped on their heads with the precision of a man closing drawers. 3 humans were wounded. One seriously. BAE Sohan had taken a plasma round through the thigh while covering a civilian evacuation tunnel. Cho Yena kept him alive with stolen Davari medical supplies, a piece of structural rebar bent into a splint, and a vocabulary of profanity that Sohan later described as medically motivating. The Concorde admiral contacted Jury to commend her. She didn't answer. Taiho took the call. "Captain's busy. She's re-rigging Sector 12 in case they come back." The Davari fleet retreated. Not because of the Concorde ships arriving. The fleet could have fought. They retreated because the ground commanders were dead and the soldiers who survived wouldn't go back down. Every officer who entered Tessera's golden light died without seeing the shot that killed them. Every squad that entered those tunnels lost people to a ghost they couldn't catch. Somewhere in the Dominion's military intelligence archive, a file was created under Kang Jury's name. The classification marker was their species symbol for a natural disaster, not a military threat, not an enemy combatant. A typhoon. An earthquake. Something that could not be reasoned with, negotiated with, or predicted by doctrine. Something you just survived, if you were lucky. Park Juno had been living inside Davari Communications for 26 days. He didn't sleep in cycles anymore. He slept when the enemy slept. He ate when the enemy ate. He had learned 7 Davari regional dialects, the difference between an officer who was lying and one who was scared, and the exact tone a supply clerk uses when they've been skimming inventory for personal sale. He knew the Dominion better than the Dominion knew itself. "It's not a government," he told Jury, sitting cross-legged on the cargo bay floor with 3 communication arrays humming around him like electronic pets. "It's a personality cult. One leader. The Autarch. Every command chain traces back to him. Every fleet, every officer, every decision." "Kill the head," Jury said. "The body eats itself. 14 rival warlords, each one convinced they should be next. Take the Autarch off the board and they turn on each other within hours. The Dominion doesn't fracture. It devours itself." Jury took this to the Concorde War Council. She laid it out clean. 12 operators. 1 shuttle. No fleet support. Infiltrate the Davari throne world. Eliminate the Autarch and his senior command staff. End the war in one night. The council chamber went cold. "This is not warfare," said Admiral Voshan, and his voice carried the weight of a species that had conducted military operations for 6,000 years. "What you describe is assassination." "Yes." "The Concorde does not sanction assassination. We do not murder leaders in their beds. We defeat them in the field, through force of arms, under recognized laws of engagement." Jury looked at Voshan the way someone looks at a clock that's showing the wrong time. Not with anger. With a tiredness that went deeper than anger. "How's that working?" Voshan's antennae flattened. Around the table, crystal-armored generals shifted in their seats. General Muratha's 4 hands gripped the table edge. "Your laws of engagement are beautiful," Jury said. "Your doctrine is elegant. And 17 worlds are ash because you'd rather lose with honor than win with your hands dirty." She paused. "I don't have that luxury. Neither do the next colony on their list." The council voted. 11 to 1 against. The one vote in favor was Murath, who had watched the vet hose 4 helmet feeds 7 times and had stopped sleeping properly since. Jury thanked the council for their time. She meant it. Then she walked back to the cargo bay and said 2 words. "We go." No one asked where. No one asked about authorization. Taiho started packing charges. Nari pulled up the throne world schematics she'd been studying for 2 weeks. Dogun checked his rifle the way a musician tunes an instrument before a performance. Eyes closed, fingers knowing. They took the Davari shuttle Nari had captured during the Tessara siege. Juno loaded it with spoofed identification codes, forged crew manifests, and a supply requisition order so authentic that the Davari logistics officer who approved their landing clearance actually complimented the formatting. Pollock discovered they were gone 6 hours after departure. He stood in the empty cargo bay, looking at Taiho's diagrams still drawn on the wall. He looked at them for a long time. Then he went to the shuttle bay, requisitioned a diplomatic courier vessel, and followed them. He filed no report. The Davari throne world was called Morek, a planet of black stone and red oceans, and at its center, the Autarch's fortress, a cathedral built from the bones and trophies of every species the Dominion had conquered. Skulls lined the approach corridors. Flags of dead civilizations hung from walls so high they disappeared into shadow. The architecture was designed to make visitors feel small. The humans felt nothing about architecture. They felt a great deal about sightlines, guard positions, and structural weak points. They landed at a military supply port on the fortress's southern perimeter. Nari had altered their biosignatures to read as Davari auxiliary species, client races the Dominion used for manual labor. They walked through the fortress city in worker coveralls, carrying equipment crates, invisible in the way that servants are always invisible to the powerful. 2 days. They watched for 2 days. Nari got close to the Autarch during a public address. Close enough to touch. She stood in a crowd of Davari civilians, her height barely reaching their chest plates, and she watched the Autarch speak from a balcony of polished bone. He was enormous. 3 meters tall. His bone armor had been surgically enhanced, layered and sharpened until he looked less like a living creature and more like a weapon that had learned to talk. She could have taken the shot. She had a concealed sidearm. She was 3 meters from an unshielded target. She didn't fire. Jury wanted more than the head. She wanted the spine. On the 3rd night, they moved. Taiho planted charges on the fortress power grid at 4 separate junction points. When they blew, the fortress went dark in sections, like a city losing neighborhoods 1 block at a time. Emergency lighting kicked in, red, dim, and full of shadows. The Davari were built for bright environments. Their eyes adjusted slowly to low light. Human eyes adjusted faster. Dogun set up on a tower 300 meters from the fortress command wing. He had a stolen Davari rifle rebuilt with human optics. The scope was worth more than the ship they'd arrived in. He settled into position and waited. Patience was not something Dogun practiced. It was something he was. Juno flooded the communications network. Every channel. Every frequency. Contradictory orders in authentic command voices. The Concorde is attacking from orbital position east. No, west. No, it's a ground assault from the northern wastes. Emergency protocols activated. Emergency protocols cancelled. Recall all units. Deploy all units. The fortress became a hive kicked by an invisible foot. Inside, 4 humans moved through the chaos. Juri, Nari, Taiho, Yenna. They had memorized the route to the command level over 2 days of observation. They knew which corridors the guards abandoned first during emergencies. They knew which stairwells were used by servants and ignored by soldiers. They reached the command level in 9 minutes. The Autarch was in his war room with 6 personal bodyguards. The bodyguards were the Dominion's finest. Selected from birth. Trained for decades. Each one capable of killing a standard Concorde Marine with bare hands. Juri's rifle jammed on the 2nd shot. She didn't pause. Didn't curse. Didn't reach for a secondary weapon. She closed the distance to the Autarch in 3 steps, pulled the combat knife from a vest, and put it through the gap in his throat armor where the bone plating met the neck membrane. The Autarch looked down at her. He was 3 times the size. His eyes were wide. Not with pain. With confusion. He had been killed by something so small he hadn't registered it as a threat. He fell like a tower. The impact cracked the floor. Taiho and Nari handled the bodyguards. Yenna cleared the corridor behind them. The entire engagement lasted 40 seconds. Juno broadcast the Autarch's death on every Dominion frequency. He didn't use words. He transmitted the fortress's internal camera footage of the body. Unedited. Unnarrated. Just the image of their invincible leader on a cracked floor with a human knife in his throat and a woman half his size standing over him, breathing no harder than if she'd climbed a flight of stairs. The Dominion fractured before sunrise. 14 warlords declared themselves successor within 6 hours. By the second day, 3 of them were dead, killed by each other. Fleet coordination collapsed. Colony assaults stopped. The war didn't end with a treaty. It ended with an empire eating its own organs. Pollock picked them up in orbit. He had waited in the diplomatic courier vessel for 3 days, monitoring Dominion frequencies, listening to an empire unravel in real time. When the shuttle docked with his ship, Jury was the first through the airlock. She had blood on her vest that wasn't hers. She had a bruise on her jaw from a bodyguard's elbow. Pollock asked why she used a knife. He was right there, she said, and walked past him to find somewhere to sleep. Back on the *Pale Doctrine*, the Concord Council held an emergency session. Not about the Davari. The Davari were already yesterday's crisis, collapsing inward at a rate that made intervention unnecessary. The session was about Earth. 12 species sat around the war table where 17 red worlds still glowed in holographic silence, and they discussed the only question that mattered anymore. It was a Veshan elder who said it. Old. Tired. Wise in the way that only comes from watching civilizations rise and burn across millennia. When this war ends, she said, how do we send them home? No one answered. The question sat in the room like a loaded weapon on an empty table. Everyone could see it. No one wanted to touch it. The ceremony was held in the grand atrium of the *Pale Doctrine*, a space designed to make history feel official. Vaulted ceilings of living crystal that shifted color with the emotional resonance of the crowd. Delegations from 32 species arranged in ascending tiers. Holographic recorders floating at precise angles to capture every handshake, every medal, every carefully scripted moment of gratitude. The 12 humans arrived in the same matte black gear they had worn the day they first stepped off that shuttle.
No dressed uniforms. No police.
Cho Yena had a bandage on her forearm from a wound she got on Morik that she refused to explain. Taiho was looking at the crystal ceiling with the expression of a man calculating where to place charges. Shin Nari stood so still she could have been a shadow with a pulse. Medals had been designed. Custom forged from Concord alloys, each one engraved with the symbols of the world saved, Vethos 4, Tessara, and 17 others that would have burned without the cascade failure of the Dominion. Beautiful objects. Heavy with meaning. Kang Jury accepted hers the way a person accepts a receipt. Looked at it. Put it in her pocket. Moved on. The speeches were long. Diplomats love speeches the way oceans love shorelines. They will keep coming regardless of what the shore wants. The humans stood through all of it. They didn't fidget. They didn't whisper. They waited the way they waited for everything. Like people who had learned that the fastest way through discomfort was straight. Behind the ceremony, in rooms with no crystal ceilings and no holographic recorders, the Concord Intelligence Division prepared for a different kind of event. The debrief. They wanted everything. Tactics. Training methodology. Operational doctrine. Selection criteria. Psychological conditioning frameworks. The intelligence analysts had prepared 700 questions across 42 categories. They had brought specialists in xenomilitary studies, behavioral modeling, and combat theory. They had cleared 3 days for the process. Jury sent Park Juno. He sat in a comfortable chair across from 11 analysts, smiled his forgettable smile, and handed them a data chip. Standard operating procedures, he said. 200 pages. Fully indexed. Cross-referenced with engagement examples from operations conducted during our deployment. The analysts were delighted. They loaded the document and began reading. It was thorough. Detailed. Professionally formatted. It covered breach techniques, communications disruption protocols, small unit infiltration methods, field medicine under fire, psychological operations in alien environments. It was also completely useless. Not because it was false. Every word was accurate. But because the document described what the humans did without ever touching why they could do it. The gap between the procedure and the person was the width of a species' entire relationship with violence. You could give a Concord Marine every page of that manual and they would understand each step and still freeze in the doorway of a room full of enemies because understanding the technique and being willing to walk through the door are separated by something no manual can bridge. Juno knew this. He handed them the recipe and kept the hunger. On the 4th day after the ceremony, emissary Pollack was called to testify before the full Concord Council. He had been with the humans longer than anyone. He had followed them to Morek. He had watched them turn a colony into a fortress and a fortress into a grave. He knew them. He stood at the center of the council chamber. Around him, representatives of species that had built civilizations while Earth was still growing its first forests. They looked at him with the patient expectation of elders waiting for a young person to confirm what they already suspected. "You asked Earth for warriors," Pollack said. His voice was steady. He had rehearsed nothing. "Earth sent you the people they keep behind locked doors during peacetime. These are not soldiers the way you understand soldiers. Soldiers defend territory. Soldiers follow doctrine. Soldiers fight within systems." He paused. The crystal around him shifted to a color the Veshan associated with unease. These are the answer to a question no civilization should have to ask. A council elder leaned forward. "What question?" "What are you willing to become to survive?" The chamber was silent. Not the silence of agreement or disagreement. The silence of recognition. Every species in that room had a version of that question in their history. A dark chapter. A necessary horror. A thing they did once and spent centuries building laws to ensure they never did again. Earth had not built those laws. Earth had built those people. The Concord offered positions.
Permanent advisory role.
Training commands. Fleet consultation with full diplomatic status and compensation packages that could buy small moons. The offer was genuine. It was also a cage made of gold and titles. Keep the humans close. Keep them visible. Keep them where they could be watched. Jury turned it down in 4 words. "We are not staying." All 12 declined. Juno added, "We don't do consulting," with the easy humor of a man who knew exactly why the offer had been made and didn't hold it against them. There was no argument.
No negotiation.
The Concord had spent months learning that when Kang Jury said a thing was finished, the only wise response was to believe her. The departure was the same as the arrival. 1 shuttle. Bay 11. No ceremony this time.
No holographic recorders.
Just 12 people walking down a corridor with their gear, moving with the unhurried ease of workers clocking out after a long shift. Pollack was at the airlock. He had told himself he was there for diplomatic protocol. Formal farewell.
Prope documentation.
He was lying to himself and he knew it. He was there because something had happened to him over these months that he didn't have a Veshan word for. The closest human word was respect, but that wasn't right either. Respect is what you feel for someone who does something difficult well. This was what you feel for someone who does something terrible well and carries the cost of it without ever putting it down. Jury stopped in front of him. The rest of the team filed past, nodding, moving to the shuttle. Taiho clapped Pollack on the upper arm in a gesture that was either affectionate or a structural integrity test. Nari looked at him and almost seemed like she was about to speak, but then just dipped her head a fraction and kept walking. Dogun didn't look at him at all, which, from Dogun, was the deepest form of acknowledgement available. Jury stood. She was shorter than Pollack by half a meter. She looked up at him and did something no one in the Concord had seen her do in months of operations, briefings, combat, and aftermath. She touched his arm. Gently. The way a person touches something fragile. "You filed that report on us. Day 1. Threat re-evaluation." Her voice was quiet. "I read it." Pollack's antennae went rigid. That report had been classified. Council eyes only. Jury saw his reaction. The corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile. The ghost of one. The space where a smile would live if she had a different life. "It was accurate," she said. She dropped her hand. Turned. Walked through the airlock. The shuttle sealed behind her. Pollack stood in the empty bay for a long time after the shuttle detached. He listened to the *Pale Doctrine* come around him. The ship felt larger with them gone. Emptier. Safer. He wasn't sure the last one was a good thing. The Concord rebuilt. The Davari remnants negotiated from positions of weakness. Fractured warlords trading territories for survival. Colony worlds were restored. Trade routes reopened. The golden light returned to Tessara, and families came back to streets that had been kill zones, planting gardens in rubble that Taiho had made. A statue was erected in Tessara Central Square. 12 figures in matte black gear, no faces visible, standing in a loose formation that was somehow both casual and terrifying. It was placed outside a rebuilt cafe, on the spot where a woman once held a child's shoe and looked at painted flowers on a broken wall. In every war college across Concord space, a new module was added to the advanced strategic curriculum. It had no official title. The instructors called it Applied Human Studies. The cadets called it something else. The Earth Problem. It consisted of historical analysis, operational case studies, and a single question on the final examination. The question had been written by Emissary Pollack, who had returned to academic life after his deployment and now taught a seminar on xenomilitary ethics that was always full and always left his students quieter than when they arrived. The question was simple. The answer was not. Earth's military has 8.1 million active personnel. They sent 12. In a 2,000-word essay, discussed the implications. The examination had been administered for 3 years. Students from 40 species had attempted it. Military theorists had published papers on it. Concord intelligence analysts had used it as a framework for a classified threat assessment that no elected official had been willing to read in full. No cadet had ever received full marks. Pollack kept a copy of the question framed on his office wall. Below it, tucked into the frame where no one could see unless they knew to look, was a small photograph. 12 humans in matte black gear standing in a cargo bay.
No insignia. No medals. No smiles.
Kang Jury was in front. She was chewing gum. Pollack looked at that photograph every morning before his first lecture. It reminded him of something he believed every species in the galaxy needed to understand. Not a threat. Not a warning. A fact. Every species fights.
Humans specializa.